challenge for me, because the stone is so quiet in its color and surface. There's a great body to it and a weight to it, but the color sits very quietly, so the painting can then be the more challenging visually. And when I've gone to these smaller pieces, it's really been interesting, because I'm trying to force myself to do the reverse of that, in that the stone in these pieces is really beautifully intricate and involved, and I'm now faced with the problem of getting the paintings to sit quietly beside them, and it's that dialogue between those two elements that's you know, that makes the combination so interesting.
Could you just sort of point out how you've sort of achieved that end?
Yeah. Well, none of these are finished. I'm working. Well, actually, I think maybe we'll talk about this one. It'll be a little easier. You know, I have several pieces of stone that I've been using, again, as sort of a given situation, and I have to take this for what it is and not change it at all. So my painting has to enhance and work with this, and I have to do things in the painting which will add to what's already going on in the stone. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of a merging of minds here. Right now, this is lighter than this particular piece of stone. If I just change the stones, then I change the combination of events, and we see this working in a different way. I'm trying to grow from these, and the way you grow is to just accept other possibilities as being right.
Do you almost, in your own way, naturally do the opposite of what your training has told you to do, so that it's kind of like the pendulum swinging in the opposite direction, so that you will learn from that experience, and the synthesis of those experiences will allow you a different objectivity?
That's what I've observed in the work I've done, is that I go off in a direction and then pull back a little bit and reevaluate what goes on, and then continue, you know, perhaps redirect my direction and go off a little further in another way, and then pull back, and you accumulate a tremendous amount of experience, and hopefully they all build in a direction eventually. But that's what makes it exciting, to me, is the exploring nature of what I do. You really have to pay attention to your intuitive responses to what's happening, and some days it's a lot easier to do that than other days, and you'll come in and look at a piece like this and feel really good about it one day, and the next day it just doesn't feel right at all.
Well, what makes you finally decide that a piece is finished?
Well, I work in a series, and and I try to push the pieces as far as I can, and then work on something else. Mm-hmm. And the minute a painting gives me any sort of grief at all, I walk right away from it and put it at the end of the line, so to speak. And instead of fighting with it to try to resolve an issue, you tend to get numb and make weak decisions just to solve the problem. And so if, say, I hadn't worked on it a week, I go back to it much fresher, having experienced other kinds of problems. Mm-hmm. And you see the images much more clearly and can make decisions based on that sort of fresh approach. The painting as it stands now is irregular in the forms, but it now does have one hard edge which echoes the two verticals here, and that's my natural tendency. And I think in this particular case it's a good one, but I might decide to echo instead the irregular things that are going on inside the stone as opposed to well, also some of the things that are going on outside of the stone. But we have a give and take here, and it's a matter of emphasizing what in my paintings, you know, I can pick from these things. There has to be a relationship. It's just as the artist, I get to choose which of the wonderful things that are going on in here I want to deal with in the painting. So it's just a matter of how loudly you want to project what you see here in the painting, and you can do lots of, you know, how loud do you beat the drum? Well, it depends on who you are and in the mood you're in.
I have just one more question. I've got a lot more questions, but one more that I want to ask before hopefully we can see you work on some of these pieces. Where do you, actually this is a two-pronged question. Where do you get these stones, and how do you determine which stones you are going to acquire and turn into mixed media works?
Yeah. Well, this is brand new for me, so I'm finding, as I did with the big pieces of bluestone, that you can't find them in the art supply store. So you have to broaden your horizons and talk to people that aren't interested in at least the focus of their experience is not art. I mean, they want to do other things with the stone, so it's sometimes difficult to make them understand what it is you're trying to do. The semi-precious stone, I bought a number of different places. You can mail order it, but then you don't get to really go through it. There is a store here in Connecticut that sells it, and there are a lot of geologists out there that have just boxes and boxes and boxes of this stuff. I have access to 2 diamond saws, which allows me to cut this into different thicknesses and to actually trim the shape if I so choose. I've tried not to do a whole lot of that. I also have access to a machine that will polish this stone, so I'm really not interested in doing it. I took the bluestone and slate as it came to me, and I'm trying to do the same thing with these pieces and to deal with them, you know, as they are. Just get these like. Well, when I work on these, I try not to predetermine the things that are going on. Right now, and I know we talked about this before, there's lots of different kinds of dialogue that goes on between these two parts. There's color and shape and texture, and all of those things give to each piece something. And the issue that starts to develop is how loudly do we play each of those parts. And I like to see something happening before I decide how I feel about it. And that means that I quite often have to do a lot of changing. You know, for instance, if I take this color and work it in to the top of this piece of paper and darken this image it has a different impact on what's going on in the stone. The stone has a very unusual color to it, and it's one that I've kind of struggled to work with. Now what's happening is I have a much darker image, and it's changed the effect relationship to this. The other part of the problem is where shall this piece of stone be in relationship to this shape, and can this shape change position? So it's a wonderful sort of experience to just walk through all those different possibilities. Trying not to take always the easy way out.
Do you, for the most part, position the hard edge or the straight edge of the stone against the straight edge of the painting, or in some cases do you place the not straight edge?
Well,
I mean, do you ever angle these, or
no? I haven't yet.
I see.
There's no right or wrong to it. There is only what
makes sense to you.
What seems to make sense. Now, right now I'm going down with this, and now I'm going to come back with just a paper towel and just lighten this. When you work on this paper, you get a wonderful sort of surface patina if you let the paint reach just the right point where you see all the other things that have gone on underneath. This particular stone has that feel to it, to me, where it's just got a wonderful sort of luminous color, which begins to happen in this. So as I'm working, I start seeing in this because of what's happening here, and now I just have to make up my mind. What of those different parts do I want?
This is all acrylic paint that you're working with. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And at some times you water down. The viscosity of the paint differs from time to time. Is that correct?
Yeah. You know, I start with a fairly heavy application of gesso, and I've started using modeling paste, which is really sort of made it a lot easier to get the surface tension that I want. So it has some body to it. You work the sides, you can go all the way down dark, you can bring it all the way back to light again. So it's you have both barrels sort of, and it's a wonderful sort of freedom to push these things around. You know, you could spend an awful lot of time doing that. It doesn't matter if eventually you've got to say, Lord, this is the way it's got to be, and you always, or you sometimes struggle with whether your decisions were the right ones or not, especially when you've seen this piece 137 different ways. You always wonder if the one way you picked was the best way. You know, as a student, that's a very hard thing to understand, that it takes accumulated experience to really even know whether the decisions you make are right or wrong. It's just critical that you make choices, and that you narrow down your focus as far as you can, so that the choices you're making give you some knowledge. If you stretch your images so much that each choice is so foreign from the next one, that you really you end up just doing very superficial things. So in this case, because I'm working within a narrow focus with the stone and the paint, and trying to be responding to just those two issues, you accumulate, hopefully, things that enhance your knowledge as you go along. Now, this particular piece now has nothing that is hard-edged in it. And right now what I'm interested in is what I wanted. There's a beautiful sort of gray, cut out, fairly sharp-edged shape that floats in this piece of stone. And this dark area in the painting kind of suggests that sort of edge, but it's very nebulous and very quiet now. And I have to decide whether in fact I want to echo that in some way or not. And that's my intuitive response, is that I want to somehow have a dialogue between this part and something going on.
The hard edge of that part.
Yeah. And the color as well, which I...
Would there be a possibility that instead of marrying this part with this part through adding a hard edge here, that you would take the soft part of this and... Well,
that's really where it is now, is
yeah.
that it deals with those other things. And then, then this becomes a really important element. Becomes the focal point.
Yeah.
And I'm not uncomfortable with this, with the stone element being the focal point, but I do feel I have to introduce some distant cousin to this in here, just to have, so there's some give and take.
Perhaps that would be through color as opposed to something linear.
Yeah, like, when I just put a little gray in, you can see that there now becomes
exactly.
A little more relationship without really discussing the shape itself. But it gets to be a real challenge.
When you are working on any of the painting part of the combination, are you ever tempted to eliminate part of the paper? In other words, just cut off?
Yeah. I guess that has to do with my training. I mean, from day one, you always were required to pick your form and then work within the space, and to not go and then crop your image after the fact. I certainly, I don't think I would mind doing it, but it's just not a part of my working vocabulary.
At this point?
Yeah, at this point.
One can never tell, right? But I mean, you're constantly changing.
Yeah.
And change could also be in the form. The form of the paper.
Yeah. You have, I mean, you could sit here and work for a year on this one painting,
right,
if you really were into finding out what all the options were. For me, I seem to be comfortable just with the possibilities of moving the stone, moving this, and dealing. That's a tremendous number of options, and I guess after a while you don't want to know all the other options, because it's just one more decision that you have to make about what to reject. It's like in a tennis tournament, there can be just one winner, everybody else loses, and it's the same with the ideas or the possibilities that go into doing a painting. You've got to reject 99, you've got to end up with just one. And it's difficult sometimes. actually these two pieces of stone were off the same slab, and so I spent some time thinking about them going together, and they may end up being that way. You get, you know, it's interesting how this
Absolutely.
thing sort of flows. You almost want to go like that, but this is so different from this one in terms of the line. You know, I like them for what they do separately, but they did go together. You can see the pieces. It was like that.
Isn't that interesting? Because apart, it almost looks like they don't relate at all.
Yeah, I know.
Because this one is so linear.
Yeah, it's quite interesting with its space, and you can do an awful lot with that too. You know, this whole assemblage idea is one that I've done with kids before, but it opens up so many possibilities. It's a little scary to when you work within a rectangle. You have limited choices. You're dealing within the space, but when as with this new work, I've started to deal with the shape of the canvas or the painting, in addition to what's going on inside, in addition to other shapes, is like a whole new vocabulary for me, which has really been exciting. And I'm now learning what those possibilities are. Actually, this is one of the few pieces of stone that it's a lizard agate, I believe, and it is quite green when it's polished. And if you wet it, you can see how beautiful the polished surface is. And so can you see
yes.
how nice that is?
Yeah.
It's got beautiful color in it. But once that water dries, then it's back to that sort of dull color. So it's not probably a real good one to experiment with. And I also, this one is one that needs to be darkened a little bit. This, I think, is right now is awfully small. It's a beautiful little piece of stone with wonderful things going on in it. I guess we can start with that. But if, you know, right now, I mean, I've got to just dance on all the stuff that's going on here. You know, with all the traditional training that I had in art school, it's interesting that I apply paint in a very non-traditional way now. Yeah. You know, you can spend a lot of time and a lot of money going out and buying very expensive brushes, and most of these brushes that I'm using are about as cheap as you can get, and because I'm very hard on them, it doesn't do you much good to spend $100 on a brush if you're going to want it to move in 27 different directions at once. They just aren't made to do that. So. I do more pulling away of color, I guess, than I do really leaving a surface the way I put it on with a brush. And most of the time I pull it away with just a paper towel. And you can already see that the stone is sort of a milky surface to it. You know, there's a thrust to this particular stone that goes, for me anyway, that works this way, especially with a diagonal. And with my paint, then I can echo that shape, and you can now see the relationship of this to this. There's also this edge down here, which is an element that one has to deal with. Most of the application of paint that I do is in a series of layers. And seldom do I paint the whole painting or get the whole surface wet and work on it, because the color just doesn't merge as well.
When we first started this this demonstration, when you first started this demonstration, it was very interesting to know how you could switch stone with switch the different stones with the different pieces of paper. But as I was just watching this process, it seemed to me as if there was almost an instant marriage between the stone and the image on the paper.
Yeah. Well, it's just a matter of seeing the possibilities and making decisions.
And not being afraid to totally change.
That's right. And so what you have to do is you have to sort of remember all the different relationships that you've envisioned or seen that have gone on as you're pushing and pulling this paint, and then decide which of those things that you really think the most important, and go back and finish the painting with that knowledge.
Or deciding that none of those things are important.
You know, it's like doing a rough draft and sort of, you know, it's like the new computers that you can sort of move words around and do your writing without having to, you know, go through 1,000 sheets of paper. I sometimes will stop and do some drawing to save some time, but it's still not the same as doing it this way.
Have you ever thought of combining transparent watercolor with any of these stones?
Well, I'm just getting started with this stuff, so the possibilities, I guess, are endless. You know, the acrylic does work quite well as a transparent. But you mean in a traditional sense, like some of the figure studies?
Well, in whatever sense, abstractly or in a traditional sense.
Well, you know, those are all possibilities. You know, it was only a year ago that I was doing a lot of figures in my pieces, and I don't feel like I've left that really at all, and that I can own pieces a certain figurative direction. Some of the rectangles that are in some of the bigger paintings, to me, they have the same sort of elements that the figure does. And so that's something that may happen as I get more comfortable working with some of these things. These pieces are so small that it's technically it's a little difficult to do some of the things that I can do on the bigger canvases just by wiping. So I may have to figure out other ways of doing it, but that's like a whole different thing too. It's a topsy-turvy world. When I work with students, I try to get them to work upside down on their things, and they always get pretty disconcerted by that, but it's a very healthy way to see things. So if I turn this way, let me see the different. Reminds me of some of the pyramid paintings that I did.
Can you tell us what you think the effect of that last move is in your
Well,
in your painting?
You know, I've always been interested in hard edges within some of these more aggressive surfaces, and to me it just tightens, basically gives the eye just a little something to bite onto. Well, and it tends, in this case, very quietly, because it's not a taped line. Just by removing the paint that aggressively, you